MacPherson today. We'll talk a little bit more about the in-person schedule here in a few minutes when we get to the executive committee report. But for now, I appreciate you all being here this morning. I'm glad you made it safe, and we'll jump into these items. So first order of business here is approval of the agenda. Does anyone want to offer or make any recommendations for a change? I'll ask again, does anyone have any changes or recommendations? Okay, seeing no changes, we'll consider that approved. Next item is approval of the February 5th, 2025 TAB Technical Advisory Committee minutes. Does anyone have any recommended changes or additions to the minutes? All right, seeing none, we'll go for a roll call here. Or does anybody want to make a motion here to recommend approval of them? Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you.
I apologize. Who made the motion?
Ollie.
The motion is to approve the February TAC minutes. Lissa seconded.
All right, any discussion? Otherwise, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign? All right, that passes. The next one here, public comment on committee business. Did we receive any public comments or anything outside of the meeting? Or is anyone here? Want to
Sure,
make a
nobody
public comment?
contacted us.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Anyone here in the audience want to make a public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward. Next is the TAB report. Turn it over to Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. And I've got two reports, one from February 19th and the other from March 19th, since TAC did not meet last month. So from February 19th, Chair's report, Chair Hovland reported the Regional Solicitation Evaluation Policymaker Work Group and the TAB Executive Committee met before TAB. TAB Executive Committee selected Debbie Gattell as the first vice chair and Victor Lake as second vice chair. For MnDOT report, Connie Seagen reported that MnDOT staff would present the Safe Systems Implementation Plan at the March meeting, which they did. There were 35 fatalities as of the February meeting in the state. And let's see, for MPCA, Frank Kosluchar reported that the MPCA was monitoring the US DOT's Secretary's letter to the Federal Highway Administration, which requests a review of corporate average fuel economy standards. The funding, the MPCA has confirmed that its federal funding has been released from a pause, and this funding includes the Climate Pollution Reduction Planning Grant, which supports the Climate Action Framework. Let's see, for the Metropolitan Airports Commission, Carl Crimmins reported that TSA is fully staffed at MSP, and they're serving over 37 million passengers in 2024, which was a 9.2% increase over 23. From that council report, Deb Barber reported that the Regional Development Guide, Imagine 2050, was approved by the council at their February 12th meeting. Suburban Transit Association, Gary Hansen reported that Maple Grove Transit and Plymouth Metrolink expect draft reports on their joint transit needs assessment study to be ready in April. Let's see. And then TAB approved a streamlined tip amendment for MnDOT's CSAH 83 dual turn lane study, a streamlined tip amendment for MnDOT's I-34 auxiliary lane, bridge retaining wall and signal modification project, and they adopted the adjusted infrastructure federal performance measures. They approved a program year extension request for Columbia Heights Central Avenue lighting and pedestrian improvements, the program year extension for Minneapolis Whittier neighborhood safety improvements, and then the scope change and policy updates they approved. And then for the March report, Vice Chair Gattell reported that 2 projects in Minnesota have had federal funding frozen, one in Bemidji and the other in Duluth. And there's also discussion about municipal bonds not having tax-exempt status anymore. For the MnDOT report, Connie Seagen reported that Minnesota legislature is in session. Greenhouse gas emissions are being revisited. Also, the cost participation between counties and cities on transportation projects. And then regarding safety in the metro area, there were 19 fatalities at the end of February. And statewide, as of March 18th, there were 56 fatalities, which is lower than 2024, which at the same time was 71. For MPCA, COLAS reported that as the week before that, there was a major announcement from EPA on 31 regulatory rollbacks. For those that were transportation related, they were going to reconsider the endangerment finding for greenhouse gases for motor vehicles, which had been created in 2009. It opened up the Clean Air Act as a tool for EPA to use tools to regulate and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. If revoked, the tools will not be able to be abused. They are reconsidering motor vehicle emission standards, which they expect to be weakened. They may remove the greenhouse gas standards totally. They may also revoke the California waiver, and this has also been submitted for Congress to review. The 30-year-old Office of Equity and Environmental Justice Office has been removed, and they are no longer considering environmental justice in their enforcement actions. After all that negative, there was two positive. Under the Climate Pollution Reduction Act, MPCA is starting to make drawdowns on the Climate Food System Grant, and the Electric School Bus Grant is still in place. For the Metropolitan Airports Commission reports, CRIM has reported that spring break had started with TSA having 45 to 50,000 screenings a day. Let's see. And aeronautical grants are moving okay as they are formula fund grants. And right now, mostly those that are being frozen are the discretionary grants. For the Metropolitan Council report, Deb Barbeau reported that federal funding and projects in grant agreements are proceeding. Projects with federal funding not in a grant agreement are on hold until they receive further guidance, and there are a couple transit projects on hold right now. The council did receive TMA certification from FHW and FTA to continue their work as an MPO, and the Gold Line was opening March 22nd, and then that week was also Transit Employee Appreciation Week. And then for Suburban Transit Association, Gary Hansen reported that Maple Grove Transit and Plymouth MetroLink expect their draft reports for the Joint Transit Needs Assessment to be ready in April. MBTA, the City of Burnsville, National League of Cities, and Enterprise Mobility sponsored on March 5th a Mobility Matters discussion of public transit partnerships, mobility solutions for accessing transportation and transit options, and microtransit as a solution to suburban access. And we had a request to have them present that tab also. And the discussion focused on the needs to fill gaps in the region's transportation and transit network. And there were no business items at tab. And then they had 3 information items: the Safe Systems Report, Regional Transportation Climate Change Multimodal Measures Study, and the Regional Solicitation Evaluation Updates, and all 3 of those are on today's TAC agenda.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elaine. Any questions for Elaine? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One request maybe, since you probably don't have the answer, but you referenced the number of deaths statewide and on the roadway system. Since we have that as one of the elements of the regional solicitation, it'd be helpful to understand what that is. Is it in the metro area? Is it on the freeway? Was it a design issue? Was it a motorcycle, pedestrian? Was it drunk driving? Some sort of context would be helpful so that when we think about our work, we can apply it accordingly. So for example, if all 35 are in outstate Minnesota, it might be informative on the design situation that happened in for us, but it's maybe a little bit different context than if it happened in Southern County Metro.
So when Connie does report, he does break down the statewide and metro, and he also does give what's motorcycle. I just don't report the full details. I was just giving a summary. Okay. So he does give some information on that.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay. I just wanted to circle back to one item you brought up, and that is, I think, I just wanted to see a show of hands. How many agencies here have funds that are frozen from those discretionary grants? Yeah, I see a number of hands. From what I understand, last week there was a court ruling on that situation. I'm not sure what the final result of that is, but it sounds like it's trending in the right direction, where those funds will be released based on what program you may have applied for and what you were awarded money for. So just stay tuned. More will come from that. But That's what we had heard from our federal lobbyists last week. So hopefully that comes out. I know a lot of us are waiting to get projects rolling, so more to come. Thank you, Elaine.
And I did send out an email to all the applicants from the last 2 rounds of the solicitation to let them know that the projects we funded through the solicitation are moving forward because they were formula funds, not discretionary.
Yep,
Because I was getting calls and emails asking.
great point. Yes.
Has there been any discussion at TAB to have someone from USDOT or Federal Highways come and answer to this uncertainty?
Yeah, Brian, to my knowledge, I don't think that's come up yet. It didn't come up at the last meeting, unless you heard anything. No, so I think it would be good to hear from them. They're probably still trying to determine what the direction is as well.
Or whether they have a
That's
lease?
a good comment.
I think it's changing from day to day, too.
Sure.
Yep. I do know if you have environmental documents right now, it sounds like if they have to go to the federal level and they can't be handled here with our state representatives, then there's one person in that office covering 13 states. So if you're waiting for comments and feedback, it may be a while. So, yeah, again, one person for 13 states, so we have some hurdles ahead of us. With that, we'll jump into our committee reports. So first, we have the executive committee. The TAC executive committee did meet this morning. A couple of the items that we talked about, one of them is what's going to be the in-person versus virtual schedule for the next few meetings, recognizing that there's still work to do on the regional solicitation, being mindful of your schedules. The next 3 meetings will be virtual, so that would be your May, June, and July meetings will all be virtual. And then by the August timeframe, we're hoping that the working groups will have had enough time to meet, discuss some items, present some proposals, and have some draft concepts for us to review. So we felt that the August meeting would be a good time frame. End of the summer, hopefully most of our vacations are out of the way, and be a good time to meet. So again, the next 3 will be virtual, and then the first in-person will be August. The second item that we talked about and recognize is that I know Dakota County, Gina has left Dakota County. She has agreed to remain as the planning committee chair though, which is great. She is moving to MnDOT, so she's not moving far. She's still with the group, but again, Aaron, condolences there, and congratulations to you. So, luckily you guys are sitting a little ways apart.
Yeah, I'm not too happy about that.
Yeah. But a great individual, we're glad she's staying in the area. So with that, that sums up the executive committee report. Any questions on that or comments? All right, next we'll move into action item 2025-11. This is a streamlined tip amendment for CSAH 34 sidewalk, curb ramp, and signal project. I'll turn this over to Joe.
Thank you, Chair. We have 3 streamlined tip amendments, none of which are particularly challenging or unique. So this first one is the City of Bloomington. They were awarded $2 million in the 24 solicitation. So this is a solicitation project for the city's CSAH 34 or Normandale Boulevard sidewalk project. The project's for ADA curb ramps, traffic signals, and retaining walls. It was amended into the 2025 to 28 tip in December, so it could be a 2025 project. And there was an administrative modification at MnDOT to add locally funded work to it. Administrative modifications are done when there's no impact whatsoever on the project as applied for locally sponsored trail and intersection improvements. So that is being proposed to be added into the contract as the addition is entirely locally funded. So with that, I'd stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Does the group have any questions or comments on this one? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve this.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval.
All right, thank you.
Second.
Second, thank you.
Omi and Sabota, right?
Yep.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign? All right, that action item carries. The next one here is action item 2025-12. This is a streamlined tip amendment, MnDOT's 5310 grant for some bus purchases. Turn it back to you, Joe.
Thanks, Chair. MnDOT's requesting an amendment to reduce the cost of 4 of its enhanced 5310, as you say, it's called the Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Program. These are administrative lines, actually. So each of the these projects is for the administration of the program for 26 and 2000, calendar years 26 and 27. And MnDOT needs to reduce the cost of these in order to maintain fiscal constraint within its 5310 apportionment that it receives. The projects are being reduced to reflect the costs being put towards 2025 vehicle purchases. These were actually amendments a couple of months ago. And these are not regional solicitation projects. So this balances the 5310 budget for MnDOT.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Any questions or comments on this item from the group?
Move approval.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'm not sure who was first. Innocent? All right, Innocent was the second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by the same sign? All right, that action item carries. The next item here is 2025-13. This is another Streamlined tip amendment for a CFI grant program. Back to you, Joe.
Thanks, Chair. So the council, in partnership with Metro Transit, which is part of the council, was awarded $15 million to the Federal Highway Administration's Charging and Fueling Infrastructure, or CFI grant program, round 2, several months ago. In order to receive the funding, the project must be added to the tip. Again, this is not a regional solicitation activity. This is a separate funding award that the council is applying for to get the tip.
Okay. Pretty easy one here. Does the group have any questions on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to.
So moved.
All right, thank you, Molly. Second by Jim. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign? Seeing none, that carries. All right, next we will move into the TAC Transit Planning Technical Working Group. So I believe we have Bradley Scott here to.
Sure. Actually, Bradley's not here. I think we can pass on that item today.
Okay, thank you for that update. Next, we'll move into the Planning Committee. So as I mentioned, Gina is not here today. She's currently unemployed. I think that's the first time we've had an unemployed TAC Planning Chair. But with that being said, we know that she's getting hired. Jed is here in her place today. Thanks, Jed.
TAC Planning met twice since your last meeting in February. 3 info items: comp planning minimum requirements, climate multimodal measures, and solicitation evaluation. You have seen or will see the last 2. Comp planning minimum requirements will not be brought forward to the TAC, but materials could be reviewed on the February TAC planning agenda. These are requirements for the decadal local comprehensive plan updates related to transportation. The discussion at the committee was pretty limited. It was mostly about making sure that the requirements were sensitive to different land use contexts, discussion about how federal policies interact in a few conflicting areas, and needs for technical assistance, particularly around GHG requirements. In March, the committee heard an intro to the highway harm study that's also on your agenda today, where the discussion was focused on different harms and organizations to engage. There were also some questions about the vision for some later tasks and the similarity or uniqueness of this work to peer work. Another item that was on the March agenda that also is not on your agenda, but good to share as an FYI, there will be an opportunity to propose additions, realignments, et cetera, to RBTN corridors and alignments and regional bicycle barriers this summer. The general timeline that's being targeted at this point is a notice going out in early May with a deadline to submit changes at the end of June, and then further steps to review, recommend, and approve TBD. In April, they will hear an info item on the TPP Amendment 1 on blue and gold line extensions, Regional Safety Action Plan, solicitation evaluation structure, and tentatively on equity evaluation training opportunities.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jed. Any questions for Jed? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Next, we have the Funding and Programming Committee, so I'll turn this over to Jim.
Mr. Chair, we met on March 20th, and there was a presentation on the update to the regional solicitation for the committee and for their comment. And then we had one action item, which is included here. The committee recommended approval of Washington County's program year extension for County Road 19A, Keats Avenue, realignment project from 2026 to 2027. And it's notable that the request is not an exception to the one-time, one-year baseline rule in the policy. And then also I understand that Met Council staff had been working with Washington County to align funding for the project. So I don't know if Joe wants to introduce that as a formal item or has anything to add to that.
Joe, you want to add anything to this one?
Chair, you kind of introduced as a formal item there, so I don't think so, but I'm here for questions.
Okay. Any questions from the group on this item? Or I'd entertain a motion.
Lissa will make the motion.
Thank you, Lissa.
Second.
Thank you, Paul. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign? That motion's approved. Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Next, we're going to move into the 4 informational items we have. So the first one here is the introduction of the Highway Systems Harms, Impacts, and Mitigation Priority Study. That's a mouthful. So I believe we have Bethany with us today to present on this. So we'll turn it over.
Thank you, Chair and members. We're really excited to be here and introduce the Highway System Harm Study. So I am joined by Hyla and Abdullahi, who are part of the consultant team leading this work.
Good morning, and well, first of all, thank you so much for the work that you do for our communities in your respective regions. My name is Abdullahi Abdullah. I lead a small consulting firm called Humanize Minnesota, and my focus is to always bring people-centered. There's a lot of familiar faces, my former bosses. Good morning, Jenny. To bring people and community needs to the forefront of discussions about public infrastructure, public planning, public processes. And I am one of the folks that are on this, consultants that are leading this really deep work that was already difficult to do, but now, especially now, it's even more so needed. It's nuanced, it needs deep empathy. So today we'll introduce this work to you. My colleague, Hyla, will do most of the presentation, but I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself and introduce this important work to you. You will see more of this work come to you. We'll be seeking your guidance, your feedback, your perspectives. We want to make sure we do this work justice, both looking back historically, currently, and also the future of our highway system. There are benefits, but there are also burdens. And those benefits and burdens have not always been proportional. So there's a lot of work ahead of us. With that, I'll introduce I will let my colleague Hyla take it from there. Thank you, Hyla.
Thank you so much, Abdullahi, and thank you so much for letting us be here today. We are so honored to be on this study. Let's see if I can click back. Yep, great. Again, my name is Hyla Mays. I'm with Bolton & Mink. I'm the project manager on the consultant side, working with Bethany and the team to bring this project forward, and of course with Abdullahi and many other great people who are on our team. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I think you have a presentation on your desktop, so I can talk that through, and if there's time for questions, we'll be happy to take them. We have spent a lot of time on the front end of this process, as you've already heard, thinking through the significance of this project, not just in general, but in this time in particular. We've been working with Bethany and the team on what is the messaging. How do we talk about this project, and how do we approach something that is big, ambitious, and covers a whole lot of ground? You see up here some basic messages that are starting to come together about how we're talking about this and how we can collectively bring an entire region along on a topic that can be very controversial and have a lot of depth to it. First of all, we're starting with a project that values highways. And I know that might sound a little strange to say, well, we're talking about harms. Of course we are, but we're also talking about all the benefits of the people around the table and out in the community who've worked on these projects over the years. There's a lot of public good here that's not automatically being discarded as part of this. It's just understanding more deeply what are the impacts on communities. Admitting to challenges. We already know a lot of the challenges. Some of these are going to be super obvious. Some of them will be new, but we're going to bring them to the surface and talk them through. We're going to investigate the impacts, understand the nexus between the people in the community and those, and identify solutions. So that's I think the most important part of this is not just about admiring the problem and saying, wow, a lot of things happened. This is saying, what can we do better? What can the agencies, what can the individuals, what can the community do better in response to this information, not just on its end? This is the basic trajectory of this project, exploring the history of it, starting back to the early days of the highway system, continuing with looking at who was impacted, talking to people, understanding what their stories are, qualitative and quantitative sources, determining opportunities to do better, and advancing understanding. Basically hoping we can give new narrative and new ways to think about these issues and talk about these issues going forward. I won't go through the goals in detail, but just to say that we understand that the process is almost as important as the product in this. We're going to be emphasizing throughout these stages that the way we do this work is ethical, transparent, accountable, and builds consensus. Of course, that's a standard for projects in general, Met Council. That's not anything new. But particularly for this one, we want to be very mindful of how we talk about these issues, especially how they relate to individual impacts. The objectives here are outlaid as they were in the RFP and in our proposal and in every document so far. These outline the main components of what the study involves. I won't go through these in detail because I'm going to go in the next few slides. But the basic trajectory is understanding the issues better, organizing approaches based on our shared goals and agreements, and mapping immediate and long-term steps to better solutions. These are three organizing concepts we think will be important when we're having these discussions. This has come out of how our group has spent a lot of time already talking to ourselves, starting to talk to initial stakeholders, and of course, Met Council staff about what's important out here. The first one is infrastructure complexity. Infrastructure is a public good, right? But who's the public? What public do we care about? And what good do we care about? It's a term that we usually just say quickly, but if you start unpacking it, there's a lot of depth there, and whose voices are heard, who's been listened to, who's been responded to, matters a lot in this, because there's been good things done all along, but there's been harms all along. Public health will be an important organizing framework here, and this is a holistic view of public health, not just illnesses and deaths, but also economic, social, community health. What is a holistic approach to centering the people in the region that we care about, centering all of them and saying, how does this impact people holistically? How are we bringing a net benefit to people? When you're doing a project, can you legibly say it's a net benefit? And trauma-informed. There's real trauma involved in this. You see a picture here of a crash, and you heard about safety crashes earlier. We're talking about real harms that were difficult for people and often even emotion-laden. People have lost people have lost their homes. There are serious issues here, and the reason we say trauma-informed is using the best practices from the different practices about how we talk to people, how we address trust and accountability issues in this, not saying that we're suddenly going to fix the entire history. That's not possible. But do it sensitively, so we're building trust and building a relationship with people to say, were you taking this seriously and sensitively? Again, we anticipate some very laden conversations throughout this, and we want to make sure we're setting it up as best we can so people feel heard and we have an empathetic space for that to happen. The schedule, again, won't go into this in detail, but we are going to be talking about a parallel path of our research and technical tasks alongside a deep engagement, especially with Abdullahi leading a lot of the work and the thought leadership of how we do that work, making sure there's an interlacing between the very heavy-duty research out there that's available and the meaningful conversations we have with community along the way. The topics you see here are just some different to-do steps in our study approach. And the icons represent the initial categories of harms that have been already started to be identified. Some of those were already identified by Met Council. Some of them are kind of coming out of this conversation. We'll talk about transportation and traffic safety, of course, crashes, safety issues, housing and economy, economic and housing impacts on people, people's impacts to connectivity and access in their communities, placemaking and sense of place, sense of what is your community, what does it mean to you, what has happened to it over time. Accessibility for all, regardless of level of abilities or other factors. Health, air, noise, and light, the classic public health components of how can people live in this environment and does it impact their health directly. Environment and climate, including the climate change questions. Trust and accountability, who is accountable for this? Is there a trust through this process and beyond it? And others TBD. We expect the conversation may surface others. We're not going to close the door and there being more conversation coming forth. But these are the categories. Our research team is aligned around these categories to do some initial research. Our engagement approach is many layered, and you've heard already the level of commitment we have to doing this and doing this well. We have a fantastic team that's focusing on multiple tiers, with the agency levels, with our technical experts, including folks such as yourselves, and sort of these different external approaches. Because of the sheer scope of this, we are going to do it at some more the group level. We're not trying to talk to every person in the region, though every person in the region will have an opportunity, but doing it in a staged approach so that we're really making sure the information we collect matters and is used in this process. These are empowered by several levels of advisory groups. We're getting those organized, hopefully meeting later this month for the first time. ATTACK, again, focused on city, county, and state reps who are being chosen very thoughtfully to represent the diversity of different types of communities and experiences in our region. This is, to be clear, we are going to be talking about the most impacted places, such as in the urban core and places that were most originally impacted, but we're also talking about the exurban. The highway impacts haven't stopped, and they continue throughout our entire region. So we're getting a representative sample of people who are impacted. A policy group that's focused on nonprofit and community-based organizations, people who work with the different groups out there and work with communities who may well be harmed. These are carefully curated by our Met Council staff to understand that they represent people who already understand what transportation projects are. And of course, presentations such as this one. We're also really thrilled to have a national expert group of people who are, these are our individual professionals throughout the country, including in our own region, who have done research in this area, top-door folks to help us make sure that we are rising to the level of national level expertise in this, on the research and curation of knowledge here. So where are we standing right now with the project? We are finalizing engagement plan and research plan. That's pretty much done, though there are living documents, of course, in these processes. We're going to keep updating them as we go to make sure they're responsive. Doing initial presentations and skating these kickoffs, and we're already starting to roll our sleeves up, start looking in the literature review and research out there. As you might imagine, it is very extensive. All right. At that point, we have a couple questions here, but I think really it's mainly open just to whatever people have questions about or want to mention to help us frame as we step into this process. And I will say thank you.
Yeah. Melissa, go ahead.
On your first question there about the categories, harm categories, the one that I know it's probably in the bucket of housing or economy, but it feels fairly detached, and what I hear a lot of folks talk about is the loss of generational wealth. Mm-hmm. And just how that's, I'm assuming it's in that bucket, but it just feels very detached to people when you talk about housing and economy. So I don't know, maybe if there's just a slight rework about how it's stated or something. I think the other ones feel a little bit more maybe connected to people, but yeah, my initial thought was this is like very plannery and not people language, yep. At least on some of them.
If I can respond to that, that's a really great question. It's funny, our research team met a couple weeks ago and had a very similar conversation that bucket probably is going to become more than one because it is a generational wealth and wealth building in general is a part of the category there, but lumping them all together probably doesn't do full justice. I should say our team, I didn't introduce all them, but we have Eco Northwest, Safe Streets, and others who are doing research who have expertise in that area and will be bringing that. Okay. I can expect that one more than the others. You have a good eye to probably expand into more than one.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I had one for you.
Okay.
Going back to the schedule that you have, as you're well aware, we're working on the regional solicitation update, and one of the categories that's being considered is more of an equity, whatever that ends up being called or determined to be. What are some of the key points here in time as far as gathering data, maybe having some feedback and data that you can provide to us? Mm-hmm. Maybe some key points in time that align with what's going on with the regional solicitation revamp.
That's a great question. I mean, I definitely might also want to answer questions around that. I will note one thing about the structure of the schedule, and I blew through that really quickly. You see these sort of faint vertical stripes there, the reflection point stripes they're labeled. Yep. We have built into this sort of pause points in the process to sort of ask ourselves, where do things stand, and are and sort of to collect information, and if there are early action or items that we could inform sooner rather than later, we're not just waiting until the end of the process. But I don't know if anything you want to add to that.
Thank you for the question. I don't believe that we will have a lot of work available for the 2026 solicitation, so it will have to be something we add later once we have that full toolbox of mitigation.
Okay, thank you both. Any other questions? Yes, Innocent.
I know you've listed some of the issues that we'll be addressing, like air quality, climate change, housing, transportation. I was just thinking those families or people who were directly affected by the roadways, highway arms, or lost their businesses and buildings, family, like generation wealth that they totally lost. I'm sure that some of those family members, those people are still around the area.
Mm-hmm.
On this research that we're doing, are there things that we're planning, maybe reparation or some form of compensation for those people that lost a lot of stuff doing the reconstruction or continue maintenance of the highway system?
That's a great question. I think we are, first of all, I think our goal is to be able to connect with, to the extent they're available, willing, and it's possible, with people who are directly impacted and are still feeling the impacts of that. That's one thing we didn't mention. Most of the highway system is so young that a lot of folks are very much with us. We have a lot of eyewitness people. We have a lot of people who know this stuff firsthand. They're not just talking in abstract. And we want this process to very seriously listen to them and bring that to the forward. I think we will be asking questions like that, like what could we do? What is possible to do? What are the different strategies? And sort of as we go along collecting those and seeing what's possible to be able to vet them. This process will not, isn't a foregone conclusion that we already know what's being recommended, but I think because it's implementation focused and because it's about saying what can be done, I would think that's certainly on the table. I'll mention that some of the research partners we have actually been doing specifically reparation study work out, I think, in Seattle and a couple other West Coast states that are already trying to ask that particular question even. Again, I can't say on behalf of this that that's where this ends up, but certainly it's not something we're ruling out. Certainly we'll explore that. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all for being here. Oh, did we have one? I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair.
Just throw something at me.
All good. I was just curious about, so looking at the different categories that are represented, one of the things that came to mind, and just to be completely open, informed by kind of over the years, the different conversations happening specific to the Rethinking 94 process and initiative. And one of the things that's come up there over time is, I think, and maybe this is something that could fall in a few different buckets or will be covered in a way, but I think just the aspect of personal safety. So people who are users of the system, who are perhaps more vulnerable as a person existing within that space. And so it's not exactly traffic safety or transportation safety per se. So just curious how the discussion might cover that piece of things. And then second question, just with I think the impacts to greenery, vegetation, urban heat, things like that on communities. Just curious if that would maybe fall more in the health, air, noise, and light piece, or that was just another, and maybe that's environment and climate, sorry. That's probably where that is, so you can disregard that. But yes, those are some of my thoughts and questions.
I'm smiling because our team, we're getting these giant messy matrices because sorting these things is really a challenge because there's some things that fit in more than one category. And what you're describing is certainly things that we have been talking about, climate and heat island impacts that are about the environment, but also about public health are probably going to be in more than one space. We're just going to try not to research them twice. We'll be efficient how we do that. But those are both in here. I think that we talked about public safety and so the sense of personal safety that is also built in a couple places, especially the placemaking sense of place. How do people feel connected or not connected to the surroundings, and connectivity. Each of these, I should say, isn't just a cute little icon. We're going to have definitions we're building of these are going to be very robust and deep. I think in future meetings, for people who are interested in that, we'll have that level of detail, including the different datas and metrics, both qualitative and quantitative we're using to measure it, and how we're collecting information from the public about their perception. Because some of this is also feelings and perceptions. Some of that's in the data, but some of that's going to be, we got to ask people what they feel. So yes to all above. Those are the right type of questions, and they're kind of tucked behind the scenes at this point, but they're here. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Regarding the second question,
Yes.
are there community-based organizations that you've engaged already, or, that you plan to, and maybe trying to give us an idea of what you are looking for from those organizations?
Yes.
So we can provide a better suggestion.
We are starting to get, actually, so we get a meeting set with an initial cohort of folks. And this has actually been a process that's taken us a while because there's a lot of organizations out there. And I want to say, give tribute to Abdullahi and others who have these relationships already where we're saying, let's talk, and staff, bringing together sort of like a group think of, we have come up with a list of several dozen different organizations. And often there are organizations that already have a nexus. They've already somehow had an experience with some type of transportation project, maybe through an engagement effort or through the direct impact. We're talking about, we want to make sure the groups are culturally representative of different populations, that they work with different groups, that they're different parts of the regions. We have urban and suburban. We have a lengthy list, and without going to deep detail, we've prioritized some for a policy working group, which is mentioned in here, but we have a lot more that are not going to be in that group just because we can't have a group of 50 people. But will be prioritized through our early stage engagement around sort of focus groups and discussions. In addition to Humanize and our other partners mentioned, we have Formula, we have ZAN, and we have other partners who are going to help us in crafting and building a strategy and talking to those groups. Any groups you can think of, we're not, at this point, not ruling anybody out, but we're just trying to do it in a thoughtful manner.
Okay.
So I don't know if you had specific things in mind.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Excited to learn more as you guys move along.
Great.
Have a great day. All right, next up, we have the safe systems approach. So we have a representative from MnDOT here. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, rest of the committee, my name is Ken Johnson, and hopefully you can hear me well enough. I'm the Assistant State Traffic Engineer with MnDOT's Office of Traffic Engineering, and I'm going to be going over generally what the problem is, why we need to do something different. I'll talk about the safe system approach in and of itself, why MnDOT is embracing the safe system approach, and I'll briefly go into our implementation plan just to give you a sense of what we're planning on doing with it. So before I jump into the SSA, again, what is the problem? And I think that we're all aware of it. Crashes over the past few years have been going in the wrong direction. When we started TZD in the early 2000s, it was a huge reduction. We had a 45% reduction in traffic fatalities in that first decade. Then we started getting a plateau, and over the past few years, it's actually ticked up quite a bit. Went up to a high of 488 in 2021. 2024, we're up to actually 479. The number is slightly different now. We added another to our crash record. So we're up to 479 as of last year, and you can see we're going in the wrong direction. Now, that's not to say TZD has not been helpful. We've saved probably, well, over 4,500 lives from the trend line that we had prior to implementing TZD, but we're just not going in the right direction at this point. So what is a safe system approach? And this is the new diagram that we've come up with at MnDOT. It's slightly different from the federal document. I've got a sticker on my laptop. We're hoping to develop more of these stickers and making them available with the MnDOT symbol, but ours is slightly different because we've added under safe road users, road workers, and we've added under safe vehicles, the snowplow, to kind of indicate that workers are important people to be included as part of it as well. So the safe system approach begins by acknowledging two key points. People make mistakes. We all make mistakes when we're out there driving, and humans are fragile. We cannot tolerate significant crash forces. So we want roads in a safe system to be designed to accommodate known human limitations as well as expected behavior. We do want to hold people accountable for appropriate behavior. In fact, one of our elements is safe road users, but normal human lapses in judgment or diligence are expected, and we want to configure our roads so that these errors do not lead to death or serious injury. So even with a forgiving design, crashes are going to occur in a safe system, but we want to design our roads to limit crash forces to survivable levels. What separates the safe system approach from the traditional approach to safety is the ethical imperative that not even one death is acceptable on a roadway system. The 6 safe system principles shown on the outside of the SSA wheel. Death and serious injury is unacceptable, that ethical imperative I just mentioned. We know humans make mistakes out there. We know that humans are vulnerable. We want to share the responsibility. We want our safety efforts to be proactive, not wait for the crashes to happen to do something, but identify where they're going to happen and figure out what to do there. And redundancy is crucial. As I mentioned with the paradigm shift, the SSA at its core is about recognizing that humans are going to make mistakes and people are fragile. We all need to work together among the E's to create a system with redundancies in place that work to first prevent crashes from occurring, and second, manage the kinetic energy so that when crashes do occur, they don't result in death. The 5 safe system elements highlighted in the middle of the ring in the pie pieces are the conduits through the safe system approach are implemented. Safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, and post-crash care. So in each of these areas, there are things that can be done and agencies that can be doing work in these specific areas that lead us to my favorite diagram ever, the Swiss cheese model. Public health officials sometimes use this model to explain how multi-layered elements can improve outcomes. These graphics show the Swiss cheese model of the safe system elements. So the bottom graphic shows that if a fatal or serious injury will only happen if all the layers fail. But if we've got redundancies in place through things that we can do, we can make things go, we can prevent that fatal crash from happening. So in the top example, say you've got an impaired driver driving a vehicle that has bald tires, they're driving a little bit too fast, and they go off the road, but if they run into a cable and median barrier, they do not end up killing someone else or themselves as a result of that issue. So one of our goals with the safe system approach is to reduce the number of holes and the size of the holes in order to make sure that the fatal crash doesn't occur. There's often a misconception that the SSA is a replacement for TZD. We want to emphasize that that's not the case. It's not a replacement. They work together. FHWA has coined the phrase, zero is our goal. The safe system approach is how we can get there. The TZD's programs work to educate and engage with communities and emergency responders. Those relationships, that's what's critical to supporting the safe road users and post-crash care elements of the safe system approach. So in each of, it's a paradigm that helps us figure out what we can do in each of those different elements that I showed earlier, whereas TZD in my mind is the relationships and understanding who is going to be involved with it. So the safe system approach is actually already been adopted. It's in the statewide multimodal transportation plan, it's in MnDOT strategic plan, it's getting integrated into the upcoming strategic highway safety plan. But okay, that's great, but how do we actually do it? And that's what the implementation plan was developed for. So the overall object, the goal of our project is to develop an action plan to integrate the safe system approach into our programming and project delivery processes so that we can get these things out there and we can reduce, again, keep the crashes from happening in the first place, and if they do actually happen, come up with ways to manage that kinetic energy. When we kicked off the project a couple of years ago, the project team identified what our project goals are and how we're going to define success through the development process. And on the screen here are the things that we felt will indicate that we were successful in our effort, that we'd have a broad understanding of the safe system approach across MnDOT. We clearly identify areas of where change is needed within our project development process and our programming process to properly implement this safe system approach. We absolutely need internal and external education and buy-in. A lot of the safety devices that we would like to use out there, they can be unpopular with the general public, so we need to educate them. But we also, within our own agencies, need to educate people. There's still some people within each of our agencies that think that the goal of our system is to reduce vehicle delay. and improve vehicle mobility. We want it to be for all users out there. And again, we wanted to also shift the priorities from reducing all crashes to focusing on those fatal and serious injury crashes. That's how we were going to define success. So think about the project objectives and goals. The big picture and the final vision for this project is to provide a framework leading our agency to broad application of the safe system approach principles throughout the project development process. The SSA will be seen as an approach for our staff to utilize in their work toward providing safe mobility for all road users, regardless of ability, and eliminating fatalities and serious injuries. So in theory, considering a public health perspective and transportation safety makes sense, but how is that translated into practice? This is one of the methods that's out there. The FHWA developed the Safe System Roadway Design Hierarchy that can be used as we're working and developing our projects. And towards the top is more in alignment with the safe system approach, and towards the bottom, it's a little bit less in alignment. But if you can, remove those severe conflicts. If you can't do that, what we can do is try to reduce vehicle speeds, because kinetic energy is key. And kinetic energy is not just speed in and of itself, it's that angle of that crash. So if you can reduce the angle of the hit, you can also reduce the amount of energy that goes into the hit as well. If you can't do that, you manage the conflicts in time. And if you can't do that, try to increase attentiveness and awareness to get the attention of our drivers that might be distracted out there. But this is critical. We also have adapted these into our big book of ideas, and so we're already doing some of these things, and that's worth mentioning. We've been doing a lot of things at MnDOT and actually throughout the state with our county road safety plans and working with our counties that's in the spirit of the safe system approach already. I think we could already identify things that we're doing with rumble strips, cable median barrier, enhanced edge lines that meet the goals of the safe system approach. But even with what we've been doing over the past decade, we're still having these issues. I actually shudder to think how bad our fatality numbers would be if we hadn't been doing the things that we've been doing up to this point. But we need to be more intentional about how we do the safe system approach. So with that, I'm going to give you some quick highlights just due to time that are actually in the implementation plan in and of itself. It's worth noting that one of the things we absolutely needed to do, we ended up with 4 core areas, 10 strategies, and 26 actions that need to be done. And each one of them is going to have sub-actions and is going to take a fair amount of time to do. So we absolutely needed to come up with some priority levels. And that's one of the things that's been done within the plan is we've looked at our actions, identified a priority level, and then identified who's going to do what. And so we're going to have owners, drivers, and approvers for each of those specific actions within the plan. So before I get into those specific strategies, I wanted to discuss a few key considerations for institutionalizing this list of strategies and actions. These items are documented in the final plan, and I should also mention that too, our final plan is almost done. We still need to go through senior leadership team review and approval, but we anticipate having it done by the end of April or early May. So it's coming and will be available for everybody. One of the things that's worth showing on this screen though is it's not just us. When we've done some of our presentations on the safe system approach, people get the idea that it's just the road agencies that have to do something to improve safety out there. And it's because my presentations are focused on that because we're road agencies and are presenting to. But safe road users, safe vehicles, post-crash care, there are other agencies that are involved in those overall efforts. And the FHWA also has been developing things that we can use. They've got safe system approach for intersections, safe system approach for speed management, a lot of tools that they've developed for our use to help us with safe speeds and safe roads. And I'm hopeful in the future they'll come up with additional things that the other agencies can be aware of. But again, it's Swiss cheese, and where we're going to make the biggest difference is in safe speeds and safe roads. A huge thing that came out of our overall effort is this understanding that we're going to need to do change management. Any big change that you do in an organization takes everyone working together. We need to have leadership, give the approval for people to be working on this, but we also need to have people who are actually developing the projects being aware of what the safe system approach is, why we're doing it, integrating it into our design manuals and things like that. So with that, we need to get the whole organization on board with this overall effort. And so change management is one of our key actions that we're going to be doing with this effort to foster within MnDOT that traffic safety culture even more than we have already. So there are 4 key areas and some 10 strategies and 26 actions. I'm just going to quickly mention these because there's so much in that document. I can't spend too much time on it. But one of our core areas was leadership, commitment, and institutionalization. That's a tough word to say. I've been practicing it. You need to have your leadership committed to it, but you also have to have everyone, like I said, everyone willing to do it and accept it and include it in their day-to-day work. And so we came up with strategies that are going to help us with this institutionalization. We already have leadership commitment. That top one says formally adopt the SSA as the agency-wide approach. I mentioned earlier we've actually already done that. Now it's integrating that approach into integrating the SSA into that approach to traffic safety. The other thing we need to do is get training and educational resources out there so people know what the SSA is. They can talk about it with their neighbors. We really want most people at MnDOT, or all people at MnDOT, to be able to explain it. A person who works in finance or works in our timesheets, their neighbor knows they works at MnDOT, and as far as they know, that's a MnDOT person that knows things. And so we really even want to get our everyone at MnDOT aware of what the safe system approach is, so if the neighbor asks, why are we doing this, they can explain it. And we've got some strategies that are going to help us in that area. We also want to leverage technology and innovation. One of these actions that we've identified in this area is we can't do much in safe vehicles is primarily going to be vehicle manufacturers doing things related to that, integrating seatbelts, airbags, what they've already done. But we can maybe be a model within our own agencies, so when we buy vehicles, we can make sure they've got the safety features already installed in it. We can do efforts to identify where our blind spots are so that we can add cameras to our vehicles. So we actually have an intention to go through our own vehicle fleet. I would like us to have speed governors on our cars. That is not a popular thing that's come through, but as the DOT, we should be modeling some of the things that we want to actually do. Another one of our core areas is the engagement and cultural change initiatives, and these are some strategies that are going to help us with that overall effort. So in addition to internal engagement and getting everyone on board there, we need to work with our local partners and the general public in order to get them to accept the change of why we want to go with the safe system approach. And those were the 4 core areas. So some lessons that we learned in the development of this, and I probably should have mentioned, this took longer than we expected. In fact, that's my final point. I'll get to that. So change management considerations are crucial. We identified that with our efforts, so we're actually going to make sure that change management models are included in how we do it. Speed management, as we went through the overall effort, emerges as a critical element. We know we're going to have to do something related to speed management. One of our specific actions is to develop a MnDOT speed management plan. So that'll go into the future, looking at target speed, safe speeds, and a whole slew of things related to that. And the final lesson learned is that we need to allow more time for agency and leadership input throughout the plan development. When we pulled our group together, our technical advisory committee, we went very, very broad with it. We included people in environmental services and our chief counsel's office and our maintenance group. Huge cross-section within MnDOT was involved with that. We even went external. Jim was one of a crucial person as part of our group because we invited SEAM and MCEA to be part of our TAC group as well, and they had a chance to review the plan. But within your own group, within your own agency, we had to add a year onto our timeline because we needed to go back to our leadership groups 2 or 3 times in order to make sure that they were comfortable with the idea. So our next steps is we're just at the beginning, almost done with the implementation plan, but it's going to take us a long way to get there. We anticipate 5 to 10 years for full integration of this because it's going to take that much time to update all of our documents, get everyone on board, change our programming policies, a whole slew of things that have been identified in the plan. So our next steps, we're going to be looking at our foundational actions that we need to do in order to help us get to the next steps. So the next steps immediately, do I have a few slides? I don't want to spend too much time on here, but we have identified specific next steps in each of the core areas for what needs to be done immediately before we go on to the next step. And in the end, I wanted to kind of finish with this quote. There's no single pathway for the adoption, establishment, and implementation of a safe system. Moving to the SAFE system is a learning by doing process, best described as a journey which presents opportunities, hazards, and challenges along the way. And I think that's key to remember. Us doing this plan helped us understand much more about the SAFE system approach and how we're going to be doing it at MnDOT. What we've done could be a model for other agencies. You could probably use similar language to what we developed, but state DOT is very different from a city, which is very different from a county. And so if various agencies want to go through that route, again, we can be a model, but it's going to be learning by doing. And with that, I'll go to questions.
Yeah, thanks,
Mr.
Ken.
Chair.
I appreciate that. And before I turn over to Alyssa here, a couple of quick questions and thoughts. So happy to see this. I think, we're one of the agencies that's currently working through our county road safety plan update. And we also added that SS4A to that as well to try and meet that plan. With that, I think one of the things that came up very quickly, and it was very evident through our conversations with emergency services, with our local partners, our elected officials, speed is a big item. And so my one question is, how are you guys modifying your speed studies and that type of thing to kind of fit in with what your plan is here and how you're evaluating context on a road? Because that's a question that comes up a lot. We have a lot of legislators that propose legislation to set speed limits. They take a 55-mile-an-hour road and put it down to 30. So maybe some quick feedback. I know it's a different tangent, but it's associated with this.
Well, one of our actions is to develop a MnDOT speed management guide, but in my mind, it's going to go beyond how we set speed limits. What really controls how fast people drive is the environment, the context of the driving through, how the road is actually designed. And historically, we've designed straight roads because the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So we've tried to go with that straight line, but on a straight line like that, there's nothing really going to slow a driver down, nothing to keep them from actually paying attention to what they're actually doing. So one of the things that we're planning on doing with our speed management guide is making sure that we integrate target speed within our facility design guide. And that target speed will help us with designing the road to that type of behavior that we would like people to display. I've driven on some roads recently in La Crosse on Trunk Highway 35 going out of La Crosse on the south side of town there. They've got a few roundabouts, but they've also got a gentle curvilinear alignment. And that's the first 4-lane divided road I've ever been on where people were going 30 miles per hour. And it's because the curb-to-curb distance was narrow. That's one key point, is you need to have a narrow curb-to-curb distance. You've got that slight curvilinear alignment, and that caused me to pay attention. So there's this idea called task saturation, that you want the driver to not be overwhelmed, but you also don't want them to be too bored, because then they might get distracted and want to pick up their phone and do something. So we think that road design is the way to go, and working with context and modifying our road designs is going to make our ability to get the drivers to go the speeds that we would prefer them to go.
All right, thanks, Ken. Yeah, I know that's a big item for us. We hear that all the time, is lower the speed limit, put a sign out there. And there's a lot of studies and details, even our own data, that shows that doesn't work. So appreciate that context. Turn it over to Alyssa.
Is this going to be presented to TAB at the next meeting?
Yeah, I think it was their last meeting they had this.
Oh, they did have this, okay.
Yeah.
When I was listening to this, the whole time I was thinking, shouldn't MnDOT be doing all of this already? And so I know that this is now a branded, a plan, et cetera, but I think it would be helpful. I did not listen to the last TAB meeting and what their take on it was, but generally that is where my brain goes, is the way at least it was verbally presented in this is if MnDOT hasn't been doing this, why? Or you know what I mean? And I know you talked about a paradigm shift, but I think we need to be more because I know MnDOT has been doing a lot of this. Maybe it just wasn't called this, or I don't know. But that was a pretty big disconnect for me, and I just don't want folks, I don't know, and maybe universally it hasn't been adopted by MnDOT to do these sorts of safety things. But as I was listening to this, I had a policymaker in my head thinking, they now think MnDOT hasn't been doing a lot of these efforts for the last however many years. I think also your statement about this isn't going to be implemented for it will take a decade plus. I think that also to a policymaker is they hear that means you're not going to start actually doing, designing roads differently potentially tomorrow. You know what I mean? There is a big thing about like writing something on paper and that takes forever versus like actually starting to change. I don't know. But that was where my brain was going this entire time, is that I think I don't want people to get the thought that MnDOT hasn't had an eye on safety for the last 20 years. It's, yeah, I don't know. Just the message I feel like needs to be refined a little bit.
I usually have a slide, and I didn't include it as part of this, but we've been doing a lot of things in the spirit of the safe system approach for a couple of decades.
Yeah.
MnDOT standard on our high-speed railroads is to put a centerline rumble in there.
Mhm.
Our standard is to have a shoulder rumble on there. We do 6-inch edge lines as our default at this point. We're doing a ton of cable median barrier out there. We're currently working on a J-turn and median closure tech memo within our agency. That's kind of one of our first steps in this, where if we do a reconstruction project on a high-speed expressway, if it's a through stop, we're gonna get rid of it and put in a J-turn or close that median. And I had to chuckle because when we started talking internal within the organization, there's still within the organization some concerns about that because it's a different way of doing things, and these are not popular. So J-turns, 3-lane conversions, used to be roundabouts, but a lot of these things that we want to do out there that we know are going to improve safety, we get a lot of pushback from the public. And so we've wanted, there was Highway 23, we wanted to put a J-turn out there. Locals did not want it, fought it, and ended up eventually getting some funding for an interchange to be placed there. Another thing that we found out at MnDOT, we've done some studies, is that J-turns are safer than low-volume interchanges. There's a lot of information out there, but we're getting so much pushback from so many different areas. But like I said, we've been doing things in the spirit of the safe system approach, but into the future, we want it to be integral into the development of it. So as an example, what Massachusetts DOT does is when they initiate a project, they work with the local partners to determine what the target speed is. And they've got a process listed out for how to do target speed. MnDOT, we've got target speed listed in a couple of our documents, but it doesn't say anything about how to actually do it. And so our speed management effort will lead us to doing target speeds and implementing safe speeds. It's just that to get that created, we have to modify our documents so that our engineers feel comfortable saying, I designed this road based on the guidance documents that I work from.
Thank you. Yes.
This might be more of a toward zero death question, but for the enforcement part, have prosecutors and judges been involved in some of this? Because a lot of this, I mean, we hear about speed. Penalties really aren't severe when people are killed or repeat offenders driving without licenses, going really fast. Have they been involved, or is it mostly law enforcement? Do you know?
So one of the things, the safe system approach, there are some things that we can do. In the words of the traffic safety engineer, the state traffic safety engineer, Brian Sorensen, safety is hard. And some of the things that we're going to really make a difference are going to be very difficult to implement. But to answer your question more directly, we do have judges and others involved with the TZD effort. The Advisory Council on Traffic Safety is another group that was formed by legislation that reports to the governor, and there's judicial members of that provide input into what can be done in those areas. But as we go into the future, some radical thoughts that might come up for some of these ideas is that for safe road users, maybe in order to keep our license, we should actually have to take training instead of just taking it when you're 16 and then all your life you've got a driver's license. We keep implementing new things like the flashing yellow arrows, J-turns, a lot of things go out there that the general public may not be aware of. And so that's one thing that could be done, and that's on the education side and maybe enforcement. But you brought up the issue about people who egregious speeders or people who should lose their license. The consequence of that, and this is where it could be difficult, I mean, maybe part of the safe system approach would be people like that losing their license, period. But then we need to have some way for them to get to work, school, wherever they need to go, and that would require investment in transit. And so there are additional layers that go beyond the safe system approach in my mind that could be unpopular, but I think should actually be looked into.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to connect some dots that I hope are obvious for the folks in this room, but may not be. And thinking about how we design streets for the speed that we're looking for. And as we're all engaged in current bills that are being proposed at the legislature and an upcoming update in the calling of the Rules Committee to look at 8820, I think it's extremely important that we bring the safe systems approach and the thought process around how we get the flexibility to design our streets in a way that is safest for all users in our own design guide, in addition to what MnDOT is doing. So I just wanted to kind of call that out here verbally.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ken, I've been following this all along, obviously through other channels, but I just want to say thank you for your leadership and MnDOT's leadership on this. As we were developing in Woodbury our own safety action plan, your plan really inspired a lot of what we were doing. So when you say, hey, this could be used as a model towards what other agencies are doing, I would say we certainly used it as a model. It gave a lot of inspiration, in particular when you talk about how it sort of permutates through MnDOT. Some of the actions about bringing it front and center, and this is why we're designing and documenting that and making sure that people are thinking about it as they're designing roadways. We've tried to do that as well, and so that when we do a project or a reconstruction or a rehabilitation, that we're thinking about that and documenting it in such a way that not only we understand what it is we're moving towards, but our council understands. So I just want to say well done where it's going, and I appreciate the effort you're doing.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Other comments or questions from the group? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Ken. So for your awareness, I'm here as the pedestrian modal rep, not necessarily a MnDOT employee, as you know. And so one of the questions that came to mind for me, I know you mentioned that manufacturers are largely in control of vehicle designs and other kind of safety features that are coming along in that. And what I'm wondering is if how the safe system approach is set up currently has the flexibility or has a process by which to consider the kinetic force and effects on human bodies with regard to the ever more supersizing of vehicles that is happening by said manufacturers, and how, knowing that we may not, as public agencies, be able to influence that piece of things, but how are we then accounting for it more reactively, I guess, as those changes come along?
You raise a very good point. Due to consumer preferences, vehicles are getting bigger and heavier. It's just a fact out there. We're heading the wrong direction in safe vehicles from that perspective. And in fact, some vehicles out there are designed with very hard corners that are even worse on a pedestrian if they get hit by that. So it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. It's tough for a DOT to get too involved in this element. I think we can advocate for things. I think that when we buy our own pool vehicles or if we purchase our own work vehicles, we can try to implement some safety features. That's something that we can do. But other than that, I think it's advocating with NHTSA and coming up with ways to make changes. When electric vehicles really are starting to get out there, the design is different than what is needed for a conventional engine. And there might have been some ideas that we could change where the sight distances are so you can actually see pedestrians better. But that's unfortunately more at the federal level and dealing with that. But so we can dip our toes into pool vehicles and what we can do with our fleets, I think.
Sounds good.
Nice. Other questions or comments? These are good comments. Yes.
More of a comment that TAB is, following a lot of the safety and asking different presentations. Just in the past, we had the safety plan in October. January, the Minneapolis safety plan, the Towards Zero Deaths plan, and then March we had the safe systems, and then in April we'll having Washington County with their plan. So TAB is getting updated with the various
plans and programs.
Types of plans that people are doing. So going into the next solicitation, how they can help set up the applications to select the projects that will help this.
No, and I just want to make one more comment, less towards you, Ken, in the program, but more just towards all of us. I think we all, to Jen's point, I think we all see the legislation that gets put out there, and it comes from local agencies, it comes from comes from our communities where they're asking their legislature and legislators to come up with bills to, like I mentioned, lower speed limits on county roads from 55 down to 30. We fight that all the time, and we walk through that. I think what you're explaining here is great, and I think this is a great opportunity to educate our legislators as well and the public, to explain to them some of the details behind the scenes on why you can't just simply go in and lower a speed. You need to redesign the road. You need to fit it to the context of the community you're in, whether it's urban or rural. You need to fit the context of the road to what you want to do. I think that's lost sometimes in communications and the passion from what happens. And so I just encourage all of us to continue thinking about that. I know on the county side of things right now, we're looking at 3 bills that were introduced this year. It just popped up on my screen 30 seconds ago, Medford. They're pushing for a 55-mile-an-hour road down to 30. And so it's tough because it's wide open. It's straight, like you mentioned. So I think we need to look at that context. And Jen, to your point, we need to have that flexibility to look at that. So appreciate the comments and program here.
One of the things the final point, one of the things that Washington State has done, and I don't think we were ready to go that direction, but they've actually added another piece to the pie of safe land use. So much of what we're reacting to as road agencies is what was created for us. Too often, when MnDOT builds a bypass that's meant to be the fast way around town, that attracts the big box stores, and all of a sudden we're dealing with a road again that people want to cross all the time, and it just ends up being problematic.
Yep, I feel you on that one. Yep. Well, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
More, sorry. Thanks, Chair. I think thank you for mentioning the safe land use piece of things, because I think we've all experienced challenges with that interaction, because turns out the transportation and land use are inextricably linked and have lots of impacts on each other. And that sounds amazing, and I would like to learn more about that. And I don't know if you could share any further information back to the group on just access to what that looks like, but also I guess just knowing that that is something that exists and the role that Met Council plays both in transportation and land use, that sounds like a really great opportunity. You have something to just dig into a little bit more at a regional level to better understand. So thank you for mentioning that.
Did I see another hand over here? Okay. Thanks, Ken. We appreciate the information and presentation. Have a great day. All right, next up, I know Tony's been waiting patiently for us.
I'm gonna table that one if we can.
You're gonna table it again? You kicked him out? Oh,
Yeah,
man.
Chair, he kind of kicked himself out. He's not feeling great.
Okay,
Under
sounds
the
good.
weather. Yep.
We'll move to Steve next.
We'll get that study in one of these months here, right? Maybe next month.
He's gonna feel neglected here pretty soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So that's good. We wanted to have some time here for a good discussion on the regional solicitation. I think that was one of the reasons we met in person here today. And so we want to talk about what's been happening lately on the project and get your feedback, more importantly, on where we are to date and moving forward. So again, the regional solicitation evaluation, you've all probably seen this slide before. The overall goal is to best align Imagine 2050 and the newly adopted 2050 Transportation Policy Plan with how we're awarding funding in the region through the regional solicitation. Of all the decision points, we've been doing mostly background work so far, and now we're starting to get into some of the details on what things may look like, but we're really somewhere between this decision point 1 and decision point 2, and we'll talk about the next steps on a preceding slide here. When we brought what we're calling the modal plus hybrid option of application categories and general structure to the policymaker work group back in February, they did give us their blessing to kind of bring that out to the committees. Not that they're 100% all in on every detail of it, but they thought we're kind of heading in the right direction. We want to get more technical feedback on where we're heading. So that's what we're doing now at this point. Some of the takeaways from the last few months that we wanted to note, again, general support for kind of the modal plus application category, and we've got several slides on what that is. But people wanted some flexibility to make some tweaks to that as we move into the more of the technical work. Desire for simplification, we keep hearing that even at F&P here last month, and maybe the biggest change as of late, we heard from both technical and policymakers they wanted to explicitly see something with bridges as an application category. So we did add, whereas before it was kind of tucked into several different categories where bridges could apply, we were directed to add that back in as a separate application category versus being part of, say, roadway modernization. We had a good meeting with TAC F&P here last month, and a few of the comments we heard there. Support to have safe routes to school projects be an eligible project type, but not as a standalone category. So that was reiterated also by the Active Transportation Policy Work Group that met recently. Desire to allow, at least these are individual comments, so I'm saying not maybe the whole group, but did hear these individual comments. Talked about bus garages, whether those maybe non-customer facing transit projects should be eligible or not. So I think that will continue with the special issue working group. Again, support for the bridge modernization, and heard people want to continue both bridge rehab and replacement projects. So currently that both of those project types are eligible, so desire to continue that. Need to retain flexibility to respond to federal priorities and funding changes. Again, people talked about the next federal transportation bill. Well, IIJA ends at the end of September 2026. So if we get a new bill, it might be different programs. Hearing programs might be collapsed back into STP and CMAQ, or perhaps just one program, STP, that is given to the MPOs. We talked about unique projects and the travel behavior inventory and regional modeling and how that fits into the current structure that's on the slide, and we'll talk about that more. And then, again, simplification, flexibility in the process. So here's just a couple slides on kind of how we got here. Here's the existing application categories under the modal structure. We identified two kind of major issues with the current structure. One, it was tough to think about new types of projects like EV charging and even travel demand management didn't fit very well in the old structure. And then secondly, the policymakers have asked us to think differently about safety, and they want to put money just towards safety. And so that was difficult to do under the current structure. So that led us to think about adding a new bucket for EV charging, TDM, stormwater improvements and flooding under an environment structure. And then on the other side, adding something similar to the HSIP program for safety, where there'd be two categories that would be both a proactive and reactive, but they would be larger in size than the $2 million maximum that currently is for HSIP. What that is, the safety group and other groups will kind of discuss what that might be, but you could see something kind of in the $5 million range, $5 to $7 million range might be the next kind of level up for a safety project that could get you beyond a singular intersection to more of a corridor or multiple intersection type projects. We did add a footnote on the bottom of this one here. We did not set aside money for unique projects this last cycle. Again, those were delayed because they're closer to implementation. We didn't set any money aside before because we were hoping that this new structure, whatever it may be, would be able to, because it was more objective based, that it'd be able to absorb some of the unique projects that have been submitted in the past. But we are going to add some more details on the regional model and the travel behavior inventory. Again, we did set aside money there in the amount of $1.2 million for 2028 and 2029, so $600,000 a year. But I do think there's more discussion needed there for probably the next 10 years of that program. We had set aside a 10-year approach to regional modeling and who paid for it and the splits between the council and MnDOT and the tab. And that'll be a future discussion item. But Michael Thompson brought that up, so I thought it was good to at least footnote it here that people are wondering about unique projects in the regional model. Now decision point 2 is, as we kind of go between decision point 1 and 2, we're going to be looking at the details, qualifying project types, high-level criteria, scoring measures, and minimums and maximums. And that's really the purview of both our technical steering committee and special issue working groups that we're calling them. Again, here's some of the questions that we put in the parking lot for the special issue working groups. Planning studies, I know Chair MacPherson, you talked a little bit about that previously. I'd say we've had mixed reaction to whether we want to use federal funds for planning. Some people say, well, if it's big enough, maybe it makes sense. If it's too small, maybe it doesn't make sense to federalize it. We have heard from the Active Transportation Policy Work Group that they would like to develop a non-infrastructure category. That could be things like quick build and or planning studies. And again, that wouldn't be federal funding. That would be the regional transportation sales tax money. So you wouldn't run into some of those issues with federalizing it, but that's something that they're exploring right now and has given us direction to kind of build out what a non-infrastructure category would be for bike bed. Geographic balance, how do we think about that? Safe routes to school, how does that fit into, if it's not its own application category, kind of where does it fit in? And then minimum and maximum awards. Here are the 7 special issue working groups that we've developed, and if you look on the agenda online, we did put a PDF on there if you want to see who's on all of these committees. So we did have lots of good volunteers, and I think we had about 13 or 14 people from this TAC committee that did volunteer and are on those groups. On the safety one, I see it at the top of the list here. Derek Luer, who presented at TAB on the safe systems approach, is on that safety working group, so we're thinking about implementation of that new plan. Jim, I know you and many others probably are on the different steering committees for the strategic highway safety plan. So we got a good group for safety, including Derek Luer. So I just wanted to mention that. Next slide here. For the special issue working groups, we've got some questions on that, and so it's going to be a mix of both virtual and in-person meetings. The first will be a virtual meeting, and many of those have been scheduled already. Then we will have 2 workshops. One of those is on April 25th. The second one will be on May 30th, both on Friday, so I apologize in advance for that, but they will be here at the council, and we'll have, that was a chance to get all the major conference rooms here to split out and do small group setting, not in kind of a large area where it could be quiet and people can dig into some of the details. In between, we will have virtual meetings, and depending on the group, we may need to continue virtual meetings after that fact if there's other issues that are yet to be resolved. Because I could see some of them taking a little bit of time, others may take more. Because within each of these 7 special issue working groups, there's application categories. And so, bike ped, I see one that's going to need to meet quite a bit because there's several application categories, and then the interplay between active transportation money and federal. Roadway's got 4 application categories within it. So you can see that it's probably going to take some more discussion, and then a few of these, like I'll say safety, climate, and equity, are looking at measures across most, if not all, of the application categories. So like right now we have an equity measure that spans all of the application categories. So that group will be focused on that. Safety probably is in multiple application categories. So they have both kind of an individualized application category and a measure that may go across other categories. And kind of the climate may be another example of that, where there is a proposed EV charging application category, but at the same time we do want to measure greenhouse gas impacts across the entire program at a programmatic level. So again, here's that same chart, and we can go back to this as we get into the questions and discussion, Mr. Chair. But this is really what we want to have some comments and discussion on. Again, we're calling it the modal plus hybrid structure, so it's many of the same categories and structure that people have seen in the past, but did solve those two issues. Again, some of the new funding and goal areas under environment, and then being more focused, hyper-focused, I'd say, on safety, because our before and after study that we did for this project, we looked at both HSIP projects and projects that were funded in the solicitation, and the ones that got the best safety outcomes were those HSIP projects. And in part because our projects do a little bit of everything, and they do a great job at that, but they are not intentionally focused just on a few measures in safety. So that was one of the key findings that we had in the study. So on to the discussion questions. Do you have any technical questions or concerns about the proposed structure? 2, do you have any comments you'd like to pass on to the policymaker working group and to the tab? And are there other technical questions or topic areas that the special issue working groups should tackle? So those are some of the questions we want to get into today. We do have Lydia Stats from SRF consultant team here. And did I miss anything there, Lydia, that we need to mention? Or? Okay. We'll make sure to pull her up a few times here.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we'll open it up here to questions or comments on kind of where things are at, what's been presented today. Anybody want to kick it off, or?
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I guess sorry, I've been chatty today. My question is about, with regard, you mentioned the discussion happening with the active transportation, like the regional-based tax funding that's available, and some of what you mentioned there was ideas for non-infrastructure. This does tie to the regional piece of things in just a second. But I guess with that, has there been discussion because you mentioning the quick build especially, and that being, I think, a number of agencies have likely found over the last 5 to 10 years that having access to funding to do those quick builds is really, really beneficial because you can have a more immediate impact with little investment have major improvements in safety outcomes. But knowing that that's often more of a temporary or interim nature of things. And so wondering if there's discussion in how that opportunity, if that comes to pass in that regionally local funded piece of things, is then could be tied to or seen as a direct benefit then for application to the regional solicitation pool of funds for a more permanent solution. So we think about some of the interim improvements you've seen for pedestrians by way of like temporary curb extensions to reduce exposure and crossing distance in urban areas, or you think about kind of quicker implementation of a separated bike ped facility that uses impermanent materials, but then the ideal is that you then have that to test it. And if it turns out really well, then what does it look like to go grab hold of the federal funding for a much bigger permanent improvement? And so just mentioning that as a potential like pipeline connection to leverage both the local and the federal to benefit everybody.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and members, I think that's a great idea. I'm trying to think of with MnDOT state aids, active transportation, if that's kind of an option where you do a quick build and then I'm not sure, but yeah, I think you're onto something there. We are going to try and get some more guidance from that active transportation work group. To the next meeting is April 28th. Happy birthday to me. But I think what would be helpful for the technical folks as we go into the special issue working group is it a project size that differentiates whether we use active transportation dollars or not on it, or do we take entire categories, some of which you see on the screen here, and say those are the active transportation categories that we're going to use the money on? I think we just need some more clarity on that. And then also like the timing of things too is still an outstanding issue as I see it. Is it going to be are we gonna do one solicitation at the same time for active transportation and the federal funds? Or does it make sense to offset that? And so those are some of the key things that are still sitting out there that before we get too far in the special issue working group, I think we just need some guidance on, and people have opinions too, I guess they can voice them here too, but.
Yeah. Oh, good question. I'll go to Jen and then you next.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Steve, I'm curious how the conversation around funding max and mins is going to be guided, and I'm curious if TAB has provided any input or if the consultant team's done any data collection, because there are a lot of funding categories on the screen, and we know TAB is interested in kind of a goal-based approach, and so we know that there's a certain amount of funding that needs to be applied to actually move the needle on whatever goal we're talking about. But then we also have the reality of how much a project costs for an agency to deliver. And in past solicitations, a lot of concern over how far down a list do we actually get in some of these categories. So I just see a lot of mismatched conflicts in trying to, and I'm just curious how you're gonna guide that conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair and members. So that's one of the topics that we want to get into at the special issue working group. I also think it's like you're saying, I think you're suggesting it's an overarching topic that I think the technical steering committee or some of these like that we said that they should weigh in on too, because you couldn't, if you just bring it to each individual group of 7, the transit expansion group may say 20 million, and then the bike ped says million, and there needs to be kind of like someone looking at the whole picture of how much money we have. And so I think that would start, in my mind, at the technical steering committee and then kind of flow back up to the policymakers to say, this is what you get or don't get from having increased maxes. I know the consultant team has noted something you've said several times here, that on a lot of the categories, the maximum award has not changed since 2014. And if you just look at kind of pure inflation since then, it's not keeping pace, and it's difficult. We're seeing that gap between what the award is and the total project cost keeps going like this. And it's only, if we keep it at 7 million for some of these categories, it's, we're just putting more burden on the locals to deliver projects, and eventually projects are going to start falling, I'd imagine. Because,
Yeah, I think that's an important point, and that's also goes back and forth. Do you want to do more projects, or do you want to get these bigger projects out of the way that have been hanging and looming around for a while? I'm with you on that. That's an important conversation. Yeah. Next.
This is maybe in the weeds a bit for a special interest group to sort out. But the local, in the bike pedestrian category, the local bike network is called gaps and barriers, and the local pedestrian network is called connections. What's the difference between a gap and a barrier and a connection? Is there a nuance there about the types of projects that would fall in those categories that I'm not seeing, other than one is bike focused and one is pedestrian focused?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and members, I think we're going to give the special issue working groups permission to tweak some of the language in these categories. Where it comes from, I'll say transit customer experience is another one. We tried to tie it back as close as we could to the 2050 TPP and what those objectives and policies were. And so that's why at a few places the wording maybe looks a little awkward on there. But you could see there being barriers in both cases. Bike, we do have a bike barrier study, so maybe that's part of the reason why barriers is shown in bike. Is that Elaine?
I was going to mention, there's
Okay.
a study for that.
But certainly you could think of a pedestrian barrier being a project you'd fund because there's a gap in the system, or there's a pedestrian overpass or underpass that you build that's being a barrier. I could see that in my mind. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lissa had to jet, so she's asked me to be her proxy. So she asked me to ask about the special issue working group for stormwater improvements and flood mitigation, and she noticed that there was not one. And is there a reason why?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So the stormwater and flooding one is going to be within the roadways group. And so we may have to bring in a few specialists when we talk just about that one. But that seemed, the project we've been funding, again, partially, we didn't have many application categories to go under. Natural systems is a new TPP category, and this was one that people had talked about. Well, maybe flooding and stormwater, which we funded with Protect recently, would be a good one, but we've typically funded roadway projects with those. So that's why we put it under roadways for the time being.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Carla?
I'm just seeing, Steve, thanks, Mr. Chair. On the, if you go back to the hybrid approach and what, the names of the different categories. So I'm seeing bridges and system resiliency. And it's all under the dynamic and resilience. So I do think some tweaks are needed just to help define those subcategories or where you would apply under better to make it easier for applicants. And I think we've all been part of the conversations, but just to make that a little easier. And then I was gonna ask under the work groups, I see equity, and I know after the presentation that equity, that's probably not gonna be, or like the harms, probably not gonna be ready for the solicitation, but is that equity work group more focused on the scoring criteria within all the different categories? Just wanted some clarification on that, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So what we heard at that February policy work group was they didn't want to have equity as an application category for now, because in part this highway harm study was just kicking off. But instead they wanted to incorporate it either as a scoring measure, qualifying requirement that similar to what it is today. And maybe it's, I shouldn't say similar, that it's a measure across application categories versus a standalone applications category. So yeah, so that will be the focus of that group, and we are having Bolton Mink is the consultant team that did that equity study that Amy Venos has come. I don't know if she came to this group actually. She came to the tab and some others. Has she, Eileen? She did, okay. So they're gonna help us, obviously they're closest to the study, so they're gonna help with implementation of that study through a measure.
Yep. Thank you. Yes.
Car sharing initiatives, where would those fall in this structure? Both in terms of these funding categories and in terms of the working groups?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair and members, car sharing we've currently put under travel demand management. And so there is a separate, wrong way. There is a separate TDM, you can see second from the bottom there, special issue working group. So I think that would be a broader application category than it has been in the past, and I see that one being one that some of the unique projects of the past may go under a travel demand management application category in the future.
Yep. Other questions or comments? Okay, so the fund is about to begin.
Yes.
We got the special work group set up, and looking through them, we've got a lot of participants, so I appreciate everyone's willingness to participate. It looks like we have a good spread of experience and representation, so I think that's gonna be good. So again, I think looking forward, you're gonna have to get into this a couple meetings, right? So, they kick off here towards the end of the month, end of the month, and there's gonna be a series of meetings almost monthly, that's from my understanding. And then hopefully by August, we'll have something to report from each one of these groups. Some of them might be further along, like you said earlier. There'll be, it might be less of a conversation on some of these items, but some of them might be a little longer. So they may not have a recommendation at that time, but at least more data. So any other expectations from the working groups or anything we should know at the TAC level at this point?
Yeah, we are gonna send out a survey to members of each of the group, basic survey, so that'd be one thing, one ask in between meetings. The workshops too, I'll say they're not they won't be, well, we'll be here for the full day, but if you're on one of those work groups, we'll have more specifics on, it's probably gonna be more like a 3-hour, either in the morning or afternoon time period, so we just set aside the entire day for now, but the groups will be, it's more like half days or less.
Okay. Good to know. Any other questions? Team? Okay,
Yeah,
appreciate the
thanks.
update, Steve. Thank you. More to come on that one. Next item is just any updates or business from the group. Do any agencies have any updates they'd like to share? Yes, Molly.
Thanks, Chair. Molly McCartney from MnDOT. I think Joe had shared an email about the Quarters of Commerce program with TAC and TAB. And so that solicitation is run through our central office, and it's open right now. And the type of projects they're soliciting is project readiness, so planning, design, any work leading up to the capital construction. The Metro District Capital Improvements Committee meets on April 11th. We'll have a brief presentation from staff and opportunity for questions. I think some, if not all of you, get that invite. If you don't, shoot me an email and I'll get you connected with that. It's a Teams meeting. And then there's a local body screening process that TAB will be a part of, as well as counties.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Question for you, Molly, on that. So I went to the website the other day, looked at it. It sounds like there's 22 million available.
Yep.
Which is a
Statewide.
carryover, and that's statewide. And so there's 3 zones, right? There's kind of the inner core, and then there's that next donut, I guess you'd call
Yeah.
it. Then there's
The whole.
the whole state. So the inner part, there was a note on that section that said that the inner core is not
Yeah.
eligible this time?
Yeah, so thanks, Chair. So what's been adopted through statute and policy is that, the state split into 3 areas. The inner core, or the whole of the donut, is the 494, 694 loop. And the staff is interpreting that as anything that would touch the loop is not eligible for the project readiness. And that's based on just the direction on how money is supposed to be spent in any one of those 3 geographies. We've pushed back on that a little bit in the metro, also knowing that as a capital bill would maybe be followed up with, we'd want to have projects, if they would be eligible for the capital money, but no, in a couple of years, but no readiness money right now. So that doesn't,
Okay.
that doesn't necessarily follow the way we'd like to see things. So if there is any change in this session to Quarters of Commerce, if legislators add funding to the program, I would say be ready. You can always, it's a short application. It's just a few basic data points to submit if you go to that website. So if there are projects that touch or are within the core, I suggest people make that application. But then the donut piece is the metro connector. So that would be, anything outside of the loop out to the 7-county, boundary. So we'd see, 65 in Blaine or something on Highway 13 or, something outside of the loop. So.
Okay.
Yes.
So still apply,
in
case money shows up. Who knows, right?
And also, if money is added to it, then probably, the deadlines for this would change too. I think that's what staff is anticipating, but they just we're really sticking to the letter of the law with what's out there right now.
Yep. I know the legislation changed a year or 2 ago, and they wanted to balance over the course of years, right? They wanted percentages based on a running average.
Yeah.
So, okay. Any other comments? That was a good update. Or updates? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Perfect. A second?
Second. McPherson.
There it is. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign?
No,
I'm in
Nick
any position. All right, thanks, everyone.